Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Gerald Henry, Executive Director of the Western Caucus Foundation. Welcome to our Digital Connect policy series. This is one of the ways that we're able to take Western Caucus policy from Washington, D.C. and spread it across the country. As you know, we have many stakeholders that participate with the foundation that are located all over the West and all across rural America. So this way we can kind of broaden our focus and broaden our reach. Today, we're going to be talking about securing American minerals for our future economy. We'll also talk about emissions goals and new energy technologies and infrastructure money. A lot of this, won't be possible without American minerals. Mr. Newhouse, our chairman, is running a little behind a meeting. So I'm going to kick it over to one of our vice chairs and chair of the House Subcommittee on Energy and Mineral Resources, Congressman Pete Stauber from Minnesota, to kick us off.
Well, thank you very much, Daryl. I think that this is a really important topic about securing American minerals for our future economy. And it's just great to be here in the Western Caucus. You guys are doing a great job, Chair Newhouse. It's great to be a part of this caucus. So I'm Congressman Pete Stauber, the chair of the Energy and Mineral Resources Committee and the representative for Northern Minnesota's Iron Range. For those who don't know, we have a proud 140-year mining tradition in northern Minnesota. We always say our mining is our past, our present, and our future. The Iron Range has helped us win 2 world wars, and our taconite contributes to over 80% of the steel made in this country. We have an abundance of mineral resources in northern Minnesota. The Duluth and Tamarack complexes include 95% of America's nickel reserve, almost 90% of our cobalt, and over 1/3 of our copper and various platinum group metals. And we have a great workforce that could mine these minerals under the best environmental and labor standards. Just last week, I hosted a field hearing on the Iron Range titled Examining Minnesota's Mineral Wealth. 5 of my colleagues joined me to hear directly from those impacted by the Biden administration's war on mining. We were also able to tour the New Range Copper Nickel project, which is currently stuck in a 20-year permitting issue. Unfortunately, we currently have the most anti-mining administration our country has ever seen. They continuously side with the radical keep it in the ground activists to slow and kill mining projects, not just in Minnesota, but across our nation. In my district alone, the Biden administration has implemented a mineral withdrawal in 225,405 acres of the Superior National Forest, where mining is a desired condition, delaying a copper nickel project. Tomorrow, in the Energy and Minerals Resources Subcommittee, we're holding a legislative hearing on 2 different proposals to roll back this harmful withdrawal, reinstate the longstanding leases, and restore northern Minnesota to mining dominance. Elsewhere, the administration has sided with the radical activists against projects in Arizona and Alaska. Biden's administration, working through the DOI, EPA, and USFS, stops at nothing to ensure our minerals are mined everywhere but America. If we're ever going to tap into the full potential of our abundance resources and secure our domestic mineral supply chains, as well as create and sustain jobs in our rural communities, we need permitting reform. That's why we must get permitting reform across the finish line. Supporters of mining, oil and gas, wind, solar energy, building transmission lines, or building infrastructure like roads and bridges have all acknowledged the need for permitting reform. If we ever want to achieve full energy and mineral security, and thus our national security, we need permitting reform. If we ever want to end our reliance on the communist country of China for our mineral needs, we need permitting reform. And most importantly, we need the political will to implement the permitting reform. Back in March, H.R. 1, the Bipartisan Lower Energy Costs Act, passed the House with flying colors. This bill includes my legislation, the Permitting for Mining Needs Act, that will create certainty in permitting timeliness for mining projects and will limit frivolous litigation designed to kill the development of mining projects. It was great to see that members on both sides of the aisle acknowledge the urgent need for permitting reform. Now it's time for the Senate to get an act to get H.R. 1 across the finish line. Thanks again for inviting me here to speak with you today, and I'm happy to take any questions. And now I'll turn it back to our chair, Representative Newhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Stauber. I appreciate that. Turning back to me, even though I was a minute late. Thanks for that great opening statement. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. And thanks to the Western Caucus Foundation for hosting this Digital Connect series. It really is a great way to facilitate an exchange of ideas and shed light upon important issues that are top of mind for a lot of folks in rural communities. I know in Pete's district, I know in my district, but throughout the Western United States, especially for those who may not be able to get out to our nation's capital. That's a hard thing to do for a lot of people in our country. I'm happy to be here with my good friend and colleague, Mr. Pete Stauber, who serves as the House Natural Resources Subcommittee on Energy and Mineral Resources Chairman. And I'm also proud to say that he is one of my Western Caucus Vice Chair. To discuss today a very pressing issue that is facing our country. Everybody's talking critical minerals. One of the Congressional Western Caucus' top priorities is supporting domestic mining and lessening, as Pete, you heard just say, our dependence on China and other nations that don't have our best interests as a nation in mind. Our country has been blessed with an abundant supply of many different minerals and different resources. We also do the best job of producing clean energy with ethical labor practices, unlike some of the other countries that we've talked about, China or Russia. Yet rather than extracting these resources responsibly, this administration insists that we turn to these adversarial nations for our mineral supplies. That truly is the ultimate of hypocrisy. In my district, we've got the only nuclear power generating plant in the entire Pacific Northwest. And I can tell you, we are very proud of it. We are also the future site of one of two advanced reactors that are going to be funded by the Department of Energy's Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program. Russia's war on Ukraine has only highlighted the need for a robust, reliable domestic supply of uranium to power these reactors. Through my role on the Energy and Water Appropriation Subcommittee, I've worked to require the Department of Energy to establish a strong domestic HALEU program that's the fuel for these reactors, to provide certainty for the next generation of nuclear development projects like the ARDP reactors, and to protect our national security interests. But uranium is not the only mineral that we need to prioritize. In Railroad Valley, Nevada, the largest lithium deposit in North America sits on BLM land. And just last week, the Biden administration withdrew nearly 23,000 acres from development, which would nearly triple the United States lithium resources. And as you all know, that's a huge part of our clean energy future. Instead of using American jobs to build out an integral supply chain, Mr. Biden would rather rely on our communist adversaries to meet our critical mineral needs. I've also been a proud member of the House Select Committee on Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party. Part of this committee's focus is reclaiming our economic independence, which includes rebuilding our own domestic supply chain and getting back to American energy dominance, which we were at just a short time ago. If we're serious about a clean energy future, I think we can all agree that we need domestic mining. And in the United States, like I said before, we do it better than anywhere else in the world. That's why the Western Caucus formally endorsed H.R. 1, the Lower Energy Costs Act, which the House passed just recently. This legislation unleashes domestic energy production, streamlines and modernizes our broken permitting process, and boosts the processing of critical minerals with American jobs. So while the Biden administration has continued to pursue their failed America Last energy policies and have made it harder for Americans to farm, to mine, and to build in this country, House Republicans in the Congressional Western Caucus have been pursuing comprehensive solutions that will enable our communities to thrive. So with that, thank you, Congressman Stauber, for being here today to talk a little bit about the importance of American mines and mineral resources and where we go from here. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we have two guest speakers with us today. First, I'd like to introduce Matt Dermody, Senior Director of Federal Government Affairs for the Central Minerals Association. Before he joined that group, he served for 3 years at the Department of the Interior as Senior Advisor for the U.S. Bureau of Land Management, as well as serving time in Congress and Senate in the private sector. So, Matt.
Thank you, Darrell. Good afternoon, Chairman. Newhouse, Congressman Stauber, appreciate being here to talk to you really about how we can maximize our mineral resources. My name is Matt Dermody. I'm the Senior Director of Federal Government Affairs for the Central Minerals Association. EMA represents more than 80 members who produce, mine, process, or otherwise support the minerals that are vital to nearly all aspects of our everyday life. Literally every sector of our economy: agriculture, construction, energy, both fossil fuel and renewable energy, infrastructure, manufacturing, technology, and defense are all made possible because of the domestic minerals that our members provide. It's abundantly clear that the federal permitting process is fundamentally flawed, with excessive delays and redundancies. Without comprehensive permitting reform, it will be almost impossible for this country to meet growing domestic demand for the minerals that our members produce, resulting in continued dependence on nations like China and Russia for those resources. Those countries do not share our values. They do not share our strategic interests. They do not share our commitment to environmental standards. They do not share our commitment to worker health and safety. All of these factors amplify the danger of continuing to rely on these countries for mineral resources that we can and should be mining and producing here in America. There are really two fundamental principles of permitting reform that are most vital for EMA and its members. First is establishing firm timelines for project reviews done under the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. Many EMA member companies have spent 7, 10, or even 15 years trying to get a mine plan approved under the current NEPA system. HR 1 includes provisions requiring environmental assessments under NEPA to be done in 1 year and environmental impact statements to be completed within 2. The clarity and certainty these timelines will give is what will help incentivize U.S. companies to invest in domestic mining operations rather than operations overseas. EMA strongly supports that provision, and we very much want to see it included in any final permanent bill Congress may enact. Second key aspect is having parameters on litigation against mining permits that have been issued by federal agencies. Excessive litigation by groups seeking to weaponize the judicial system against our industry can cause years or even decades of delays, which further prevents these essential domestic mineral resources from being produced. To be clear, EMA supports all stakeholders having a say in allowing their voices to be heard during a permitting process. However, once that permit has been granted, after everyone has had their opportunity to provide input and comments, the project should be allowed to go forward without the threat of frivolous litigation hanging over its head. HR 1 contains provisions to address this issue, and we strongly support litigation reform being included in any final bill. A lot of the current discussion on permitting reform has revolved around NEPA, and rightly so. As we discussed, it's fundamentally in need of reform, very much so. However, I would like to make it known that there are obviously other statutes that provide challenges and delays for our members. The Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act, the National Historic Preservation Act, all have provisions that would benefit from Congress being able to update and modernize to further streamline the appeals process for getting domestic mining projects done. In closing, EMA remains committed to working with you and with members from both parties, both chambers, to get a meaningful, substantial permitting reform project bill over the line so that our members can continue to produce the essential minerals that our country needs. Forming NEPA is important, but as I said, if a NEPA bill is passed into law, that's the first step. not the last. It's a comprehensive puzzle, and we are ready to work with you and your colleagues to find solutions to all aspects of that puzzle so that we can take advantage of the vast mineral resources our country is blessed with. Thank you, and I look forward to any questions folks may have.
Thanks, Matt. And we have coming in virtually with us via our Digital Connect, Russ Lawrence, President of the United States Antimony Corporation. Pedro, if you can make sure we have his volume up. We have a speaker issue, so we're gonna have to go with the computer speaker here. So listen carefully, but they have an interesting story to tell, and you have your CEO with you. So if you want to introduce him as well, Russ, we'd appreciate that. Please, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks very much. Yes, with me here is John Gustafson, to my right, CEO of US Antimony. I'm president. We took over here in June of 2020 after the death of the previous CEO and president who formed this company. It was formed in 1969 after ore was discovered here in Thompson Falls, Montana. And the company headquarters is here. Center of operations has remained here ever since. However, the production of antimony from ores in Montana halted here in the late 1980s, echoing what everyone just announced, due to the poor commodity price, but also prohibitively expensive permitting and operating costs. The company was forced to started to seek and establish alternate sources of antimony and processing facilities for the production of antimony, chiefly resulting in outposts in Mexico. The company has 3 installations pertaining to the production of antimony. The one here in Montana includes a smelter, lab, offices, and limiting crushing and hydrometallurgical operations capable of processing and permitted for various sources of non-sulfide ores and concentrates. The facility here is permitted for 9 furnaces. It additionally has 4 electric furnaces in production for the production of antimony trisulfide, which is used in primers. US Antimony is the only antimony producing facility in the United States. Our second facility is in Coahuila, Mexico, North Central. It's a smelter. It has a lab, crushing plant, a caustic leach plant, capable of processing and permitted for all types of ores, both oxides and sulfides. The facility has 3 long rotary furnaces and 17 small rotary furnaces, and has a smelting capacity far in excess of its feed. The facility produces crude antimony oxide and finished antimony metal in the form of ingots. The third facility is at our Guanajuato facility in Mexico, and it's essentially a flotation plant. It has a crushing, flotation, a gravity circuit, a cyanide leach circuit, which is all permitted, and it's capable of producing antimony concentrates. Just a little bit of background. Antimony metal is classified as both a wartime mineral and a critical mineral, as has been stated, and is used in its metallic form for a hardening agent in lead and for various other applications, but most notably in munitions. Antimony trioxide, which is our main seller here, is used as a fire retardant in plastics and textiles, such as in wire insulation, military tarps, military combat clothing, biohazard suits, and as a catalyst in the production of all plastics, a non-brittle fire retardant for PVC and ABS pipe. It's also an opacifier in porcelain. It's also used in glass production. Antimony trisulfide is used for primers for munitions. In 2020, the Chinese, who have dominated the world reserve of antimony, and particularly antimony trisulfide, due to their historical reserve and dominance, halted the export of antimony trisulfide to the United States. As a result, the demand for a domestic source of antimony trisulfide has been deemed increasingly important by the DoD and the DLA. U.S. Antimony has successfully obtained the only U.S. approval from the DoD to provide antimony trisulfide to the government for use in primers. The approved material was sourced from a deposit owned by U.S. Antimony in Mexico, known as the Sierra Guadalupe mine. The mine has been worked intermittently since the 1900s, but no resource reserve study has ever been performed. In the mid-2020s, the area of the mine was overtaken by the Sinaloa drug cartel. And U.S. Antimony was asked again recently to provide details of this, along with a proposal for assistance from the DoD and the Office of the Secretary of Defense. These documentations are available upon request. The DoD has been in contact with the Mexican embassy to investigate avenues of assistance for U.S. Antimony via the Mexican military attaché to provide us security. And that's just the background. And I think we would probably learn more if we have questions, but that's basically our presentation.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you both. I want to turn over kind of some questions and some discussion about minerals issue. I'll start with Colonel Stauber.
I will just say to your comments, you described my permitting for mining needs act certainty, clarity, timeliness, and the record of decision. I think that the record of decision, like right now, as you know, as the mining folks know, you can have a record of decision 5 years, 11 months, and 29 days later file a lawsuit. It's within 6 years. We originally had 1 year, but we worked with Senator Manchin, and he brought it for 120 days, 4 months. That's reasonable after record of decision. That gives certainty with the project. I want to just say this. I want to thank you for joining us today, but the Central Minerals Association surely knows that we have an abundance of critical minerals, including significant deposits of critical minerals in northeastern Minnesota, the Duluth complex. Unfortunately, the Secretary of Interior, who oversees USGS and the critical minerals list, stated multiple times under oath that she did not know there were critical minerals in the 225,000 acres that she withdrew from mining. Matt, how are we supposed to make sound public policy when our own agency leaders at best either don't know or at worst ignore the resources we have?
It's a great question, Congressman, and we appreciate your leadership on the permit and then Bill, we're supportive of that. We definitely want to keep working with you to get that done. As to your question about the administration's current stance, it's both confusing and disappointing to us, given especially the administration's discussion of how they have given a talk about the importance of critical minerals and rare earth elements, particularly for the green energy objectives that they have. Those things cannot possibly happen without these resources in your district and other areas where our members are mining them. And from our perspective, it doesn't make sense to take any areas off the table like that without a thorough understanding of what is not there, and then a discussion of how can we responsibly extract these resources as much as possible, done safely, done to proper standards, which we do, in a way that will allow us to use those things so we don't have to depend on other countries and can still move forward on even the administration's own goals. It confuses us. They seem to be working at their own cross purposes.
Right. And then relying on foreign adversarial relations who use child slave labor with us. And so one of the frustrating things is we have the biggest copper nickel find in the world. And we put the mining ban on for purely political reasons. They didn't even go through an environmental statement. And so, and then to ask other foreign nations for their critical minerals, not caring about the labor standards. That's a frustrating. But I will say, and I think, tell me if you agree with me, you cannot meet the standards required by this administration without domestic mining, period. Correct?
Yeah, we would agree. And, to your point again, otherwise the alternative is to depend on these foreign countries who use abysmal practices and, we are the great alternative, and it will benefit not only the members, folks who are doing the mining, but the supporting industries who facilitate the mine, the vendors and part suppliers, but then also even the downstream manufacturing. We have a chance to boost domestic mining, but also domestic manufacturing as well. It's a multi-fold benefit while enhancing our national security. It's a multi-fold benefit that we should be working to exploit.
The Lower Energy Costs Act and my permit from IDEs Act, which is within it, it's permitted reform, which allows us to mine, process here, and manufacture here. American jobs and technology.
So.
Questions? Yeah, please.
We lost our guest. Is Mr. Lawrence still on?
Yeah, he's still.
I just wanted to make a comment, not necessarily a question, but thank you, Mr. Lawrence, for your presentation and I think pointing out to those of us here in this room and also listening that the things that we've been talking about are not theoretical. This is a real life example of how our policies, our regulations, our systems are putting us at a strategic disadvantage in forcing us to be reliant on sources that, as Matt said, are not our allies. They have a completely different agenda. And by the restrictions being placed on the mining industry and being able to secure the sources of antimony, which I think a lot of us in this room, as you were going through your list of the things that is an ingredient in, we're quite surprised. We truly can say that this is a huge problem that needs to be addressed. So I just want to say thank you for your presentation. Thank you for helping us and our audience understand that how critical this is, that we solve this problem by better laws, better regulation that will allow us to utilize those things that we have in this country, allow us to not only be competitive, but there's something here for all persuasions that will allow us to realize that clean energy future that is important for the next generations that follow. So I just want to say thank you, Matt, for being here as well, and Mr. Stauber. Great stuff.
You know, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I will just tell you that this administration will find every excuse to mine domestically. They'll have bureaucrats within the agencies, slow walking permits, say they don't have enough folks to make the decisions or look at the data. It's wrong. If we have the political will in this country, if we changed, if this administration changed their thought and had the political will to domestically mine, we could literally change the world. They would look at us on how to do it. The world would to follow our lead on the extraction of these minerals using the labor standards and environmental standards. And I just think that this administration, it's all about politics. They'll never be able to reach their goal without domestic mining here. And it's just really sad because these are our friends and neighbors, and these are really good paying jobs. And it's not just the mining jobs, it's the secondary jobs.
Just before you go out to the audience for any questions, just want to recap Russ and your group. And what you've been trying to say is that your materials are critical for fire retardant stuff for our military, and for the catalysts for explosives used by our military. And we do not have domestic supply for that. Is that pretty much a recap?
Yes, that's accurate. But with specific emphasis on primer, since we are the only domestic antimony supplier for the primer market. It's also used for a variety of other non-military fire retardants, high-tech devices like smartphones, semiconductors, the vinyl in cars, etc. So, but that's an accurate recap. We're just concentrating more on the antimony trisulfide insofar that up until 2020, we had importation of that material. We don't have it anymore. So that's a real bottleneck in terms of supplying the military with primers.
And your mine, Montana, if it was allowed to operate, would be able to provide that?
No, our mine, well, essentially, US Antimony went from a formal mining company. We're still a mining company, but we've had to outsource our mines, as I highlighted, and the facility here actually takes concentrates that we produce in Mexico and synthesizes what's known as antimony lump in our electric furnaces for sale to and provision for the primer market, both on the open market and for the military. And as I say, we're the only one that actually has permit to do so, as far as I understand.
That's true.
So we're actually starting up the Sierra Guadalupe mine as we speak, and got to work around the cartels. But we're also looking at another source in Mexico, the Soyatal district, to provide an auxiliary source of antimony trisulfide for primers. I just guess I'm emphasizing primers, but notwithstanding, in the 10-year process that we've gone through to get that permit, we asked the question repeatedly whether the US government would be interested in replenishing its strategic stockpile of antimony metal, which we understood has been entirely depleted. In other words, there is no strategic stockpile of antimony metal. And the answer came back that they would be interested, but it would take 6 years to get through Congress before they could even consider purchasing any. So
The suppliers that you were relying on to get that process were China and the mine that's controlled in an area controlled by the cartels in Mexico.
well, the demand for trisulfide has been taken up until 2020 by China. In other words, we had a trade relation with them, and China was importing, but they put a halt on the importation. And I don't know what the cause was there, but I think it had to do with the embargo that Trump.
It could be with the embargo, it could be the resources are running low.
Yeah, they're also, evidently, China is consuming everything they're producing, unlike the past. In the past, they dominated the market for antimony across the board. And the estimate was that they had 94% of the world reserve of antimony, the second being Bolivia, and the third being Mexico. But during World War II, let's see, let me just read this. From the period of 2013 through 2020, the production has actually been dominated by China, Russia, and Tajikistan, accounting for 88% of the supply of antimony. But when we're talking antimony, that's a little bit different than antimony trisulfide. And the reason I keep coming back to antimony trisulfide, it's the bottleneck for the military because of the primer and the embargo or halting of the importation. They haven't imported any antimony trisulfide since 2020. The Chinese haven't. So I hope that clarifies it.
Thank you. It's an interesting topic on many of us have heard about. Questions from our house audience here on the issue? There's some experts. Quiet in the group. So anything in the chat room, Pedro, from cross country?
I'm sorry.
Everyone, Sean Appleton with Crest Citizens for Responsible Energy Solutions. You mentioned your Chairman Newhouse, your participation on the select committee in China. Are they planning any sort of energy focus to talk about U.S. vulnerabilities, in comparison with China? Or is that a topic of some of the of your colleagues on that subcommittee, or is it still getting up?
So you asked if the select committee on China was planning any look at
In focus,
or focus on energy competitiveness. Frankly, we've had just a couple of hearings so far. We're delved into a number of things, the Uyghur situation, we're looking at some of the Taiwan issues. There's many things that we're going to spend time on over the next 7 months. I'm going to bring this particular issue up to Chairman Gallagher. I think this bears some focus, absolutely. It's not one that I was aware of, and it sounds to me like if the only source of critical materials for our military historically has been China. Now not, I guess, for the last 3 years. That we have in this country and are not securing here certainly is a matter of huge national security. So this has been a very valuable opportunity to learn more. So the answer is not that I know of, but we will.
We did have one because China has not imported types sulfide since 2020. Russ mentioned imported. Can we get clarification?
Russ, yeah, can you clarify that in the import situation with antimonium sulfate?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like antimony sulfides, trisulfides.
Yes,
They haven't exported it.
the Chinese, prior to roughly June, just give me a second, I want to verify this.
Sometime in 2020,
It was sometime in 2020, probably late 2020, that the Chinese announced and actually halted barges that were laden with antimony trisulfide. They were making regular importations to the United States until that time. And we kept waiting to see if they'd reestablish importation, and they have not. And the situation with antimony trisulfide is very critical, so much so that in our talks with the DoD, it's been escalated from the Department of Defense to the DLA to now the Office of the Secretary of Defense. And the question remains, are we and can we source antimony trisulfide for primers without the Chinese? And, you know, there have been some negotiations, but we're kind of at a seeming standstill here. And that's why, you know, we sent 2 people into the area of the Sierra Guadalupe, and they asked us to prepare a draft of what we might need for help. And by they, I mean the DoD. And we drafted up a basic proposal, which included 3 different tiers. One was a financial help to hire security. The other one was just security itself. And the other one was a hybrid between security and financial support in order to get in there and mine. We think we have a workaround, but we would very much be interested in pursuing any kind of aid. And of course, our primary concern is survival of the company. But beyond that, there's actually a real question about national security and preparedness here. If you're patriotic at all, you probably ought to set off some alarm bells. I think that the DoD is waking up to it, but we're hoping. I hope that clarified the question, or the answer to the question.
Thank you very much for that. It's something I'm here, Washington are very aware of.
You've gotten our attention. You've definitely gotten our attention.
Okay, great.
You know, we're going to continue this conversation on critical minerals and our economy and our future energy and needs going forward. We'll be in Salt Lake City in June, discussing this issue and also doing some mine touring, putting folks on the ground. And we have another question before we break up here.
Yes, Congressman Stauber, Bill Rising from Freeport McMoran. We are the world's largest publicly traded copper mining company. We produce almost over 9% of the world's copper. There's been an initiative to have copper listed as a critical mineral. A letter has been sent to Secretary Haaland, and we have received a formal response from the U.S. Geological Survey, effectively declining the opportunity to have copper listed as a critical mineral. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on this. The issue really becomes there is no clean energy transition without copper.
100%. No, you're exactly right. And it's unfortunate that this administration won't look at it that way. Again, I said earlier, we cannot transition to where this administration wants to go without domestic mining. We can't do it. And so, I mean, and you know that the Duluth complex holds it's the biggest copper nickel find in the world. And the more they explore, the more mineral wealth they find. And I will just say this, and I think you know this, Minnesota holds the most mineral wealth of any state in this nation, with the exception of Alaska. That's it. And, people have to understand our opportunities. I mean, we have the iron ore and critical minerals now, like no other state has. And so when the secretary, cancels the opportunity to mine, again, she had no idea there was even critical minerals there. Under oath, she said that, and she's responsible for doing that. And we know that copper is extremely important, part of our everyday society. We need it in the EVs and electric works and our wind and solar, all that. With 4,000 pounds, between 4,000 and 6,000 pounds of copper in every windmill. Where do I get that from? So I know what you're saying, and it's unfortunate this administration is kind of stonewalling that. But when you look and review, you would think the DoD would say for sure it is. So we'll see. Good question. Very good.
And you mentioned Arizona and Alaska, and those are two other copper projects taken
Yes.
offline by this administration. So combine those three states, there was a lot of copper taken offline.
That's right.
We are joined by the Honorable LaMalfa, California. And we are about to wrap, so you're just in time for a last comment, sir. If you would like to make a comment on critical minerals.
What are we talking about?
Mining.
Well, love it. Mr. Stauber is a champion of that, and eager to join when we can on his outings up in Minnesota when it's not January or February. You can actually hit the ground easier. But, it's obviously been very important in Northern California. California started in 1849 because of mining gold and all the other products we can get. We know it's going to be a bigger component for trying to electrify everything, which I'm against, but we lost out on big opportunities with Afghanistan. There's a lot of lithium and stuff over there, but we need to be producing in North America anyhow. We've got to overcome incredible problems there is to get mining sited and permitted. It's so hypocritical that they want to do all these things with electrification. We can't secure the minerals in North America where we have the reserves, so we'll be able to find the reserves. I don't know if this is the direction you want to go here, but you need to hear me talk or not. It's just, I'm 110% with you on this. Any other thought narrowing on it?
No, you said everything. We talked about you can't beat this administration's energy goal without domestic mining. You just